E3 Conserve is a new file system that takes advantage of advances in nickel titanium heat treatment technology to allow instruments to be designed that are much more conservative and more flexible than legacy file systems. In this video, we'll go through the technique for using the E3 files to maximum efficiency. The first file in the system is the Shaper X. This file has a tip size of 15, but due to its variable taper, it has a maximum dimension of 0.8 millimeters. So this is different to the typical shaper that has a maximum dimension of 1.2. So that's 0.8 versus 1.2. So as opposed to most orifice shapers, this can be used quite deep within the root canal system, and it won't over prepare, it won't be too aggressive. And actually you should be using this to within half to almost 2/3 of the root canal system, and this will help a lot in the overall preparation of the canal. So we're using a pre-curved size 10 file, and we're just making sure that we've got a glide path in that coronal half to 2/3 of the canal, and you should be measuring this from your pre-op radiograph and just using estimates from tooth length, and just making sure that we have a bit of a glide path there. You can see the Shaper X there, it's still pretty conservative. We're going to move the stopper to half to 2/3 length. And what you'll see here is that it's quite flexible. We need to put it into the canal before we start it rotating. That's quite important. And we let the file do the work. And the feeling that I want you to have when you're using this instrument is you have a finger rest, and as soon as you feel the file start to bite, you withdraw the file. If the file's not progressing, you take it out and you clean it. Because the files are more conservative, you find that there is going to be a little bit more debris build up. Because they're so flexible, part of the heat treatment, it means they're a little bit softer, so they don't cut aggressively like your other files do. And that's a good thing because it means it's not removing a lot of tooth structure. It follows the path of the canal more. And you see here, we're only taking very small progressions. As soon as we feel that file start to bite, we pull back on the file. And that's the sensation you should be having with every rotary file. You should be letting it run in under very much controlled conditions. And as soon as you feel it biting, you bring it back. These files with their heat treatment can spend a lot of time in the canal. So we're not so concerned about them overcutting. We're not so concerned about them separating due to being overused, because the heat treatment is significant of them. So you can spend a lot of time in the canal, and you should spend a lot of time in the canal with these files. So we're just using a size 10 now, 8 and 10, to go to working length, and we confirm that working length with an apex locator. And once we've got our working length, we're going to move on to the Shaper 1. So this is a size 17 at the tip, and maximum diameter of 0.6 millimeters. This instrument has a different sort of heat treatment to the other files. And what I mean by that is that it's designed to be a little bit stiffer. The reason for that is because it is such a fine file. It's a glide path file. It's designed to cut just that little bit more aggressively. But again, it is a softer instrument. It follows the path of the canal more. You can see that in this plastic block. And so again, you want to spend a lot more time in the canal than you normally would with an instrument. We're not worried about this separating because of cyclic fatigue. It's got a very high cyclic fatigue. We are going to get a little bit more debris built up, so you have to spend more time in the canal. And that's a good thing. We're spending more time moving the irrigant around. We're spending more time removing debris. So we take our time, we recapitulate, and we just keep working that file. And as we feel it start to bite, we pull back. Spend time just going up and down. You will get used to the sensation of being able to spend time in the canals with these. It's a much more relaxed way of preparing canals. So once you reach your working length, we can see here we're going back and forward. So we're going back to the apex at least 10, sometimes 15, 20 times. So we're making sure that we've got that prepared well. Irrigate well between files and recapitulate, and make sure that there's no debris blocking the canal. The system has a third shaper file, so this is the Shaper 2. It has a slightly bigger tip, slightly bigger apical taper, and a slightly bigger maximum diameter. It's completely optional for those situations where you might have a long canal or a more curved canal. So now we're going to move on to the first finishing file. This is a size 20 at the tip. So the finishing one, it's size 20, 06 taper apically, but still only has a maximum diameter of 0.8. Grab this file and just have a little bit of a feel and see how flexible that instrument is. It can be pre-curved to move into a canal that's difficult to get access to. We want to place it into the canal before we start it rotating. And again, we're using that same technique where we advance the file, and as soon as we feel it start to bite, we pull it back. We spend a lot of time back and forward just taking very small advances. We never ever push apically. We let the file do the work, take it out, clean it, and irrigate when it starts to build up with debris. And then we go back in again using that finger rest, and as soon as we feel it start to bite, then we pull back. So we're letting the file do the work. And once we reach the apex, we go back and forward, make sure we're hitting the apex 10 to 15 times, and we make sure that that canal is prepared well. It doesn't cut aggressively, it follows the path of the canal very well, and so we have to spend time in there. Again, that's a very good thing. We're spending time with this file in the canal, which is moving irrigant up and down through the canal, and also removing debris. So once we're happy that the canal has been prepared well with the finisher 1, we're going to move on to the finisher 2. This is size 25 at the tip. It still is only a 0.8 millimeter diameter file coronally. Again, observe how flexible this instrument is. So this is a 2506 over the last 3 millimeters of the instrument tip. So it's a size 25, it has a decent taper at the apex, but because of the variable taper, the coronal diameter is still very narrow. And you can see how well this follows the original canal anatomy, and we spend time in here, we can keep preparing the canal. It's not over-cutting, it's not being too aggressive, it's not going to strip or ledge. And again, you can spend time in the canal, so make sure it's prepared well. Lots of irrigant is getting down apically, and you're removing lots of debris. Now, a couple of things to remember when using this file or any file system. If you find that a file is not progressing, then there's a couple of things you can do. You can certainly remove the file, clean the debris off the file, and irrigate and recapitulate. You can move down a file size. So if you're trying to use the F1, for example, and you find that it's not going to length, then you can move back to a Shaper 1 or a Shaper 2 and prepare the canal a little bit more. And the other thing you can do is if for example, the S1 is not progressing, then you can prepare more coronally. So you can use the Shaper X more to free up that coronal area so that the Shaper 1 is only working more in the apical part of the canal. For larger canals, you're going to finish off with either a finishing 3 file, which is a size 30 at the tip, or a finishing 4 file, which is size 40 at the tip. I would recommend for larger canals, such as a palatal canal, you should be finishing at an F4, or a distal canal, a single distal canal of a lower molar, you should be finishing at an F3 or an F4 as well.